guys, welcome back to Listen the Great. This is one of the most not random per se, it's one of those videos I was like, I have to do it. If I don't do it, I might never do it. I have a book here and I have written a lot of it. I've written 3 seasons, each of 22 episodes on sex, safe sex. And I don't know what name I'm going to give it. I think I'm going to call it Sex Talks with Elysian. And I've wanted to do this because it came like insight to me in the middle of the night. I was just at my mother's house in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep, and I'm very passionate about bettering our society and trying to make the best out of situations, like trying to make a better and safe society, especially because now I'm a mother. I'm thinking about like how we can raise our children to be in a safer society, in a society where they know more, especially about sex matters, in a way that is different from us. My personal encounter growing up with sex is that apart from the classes I got in school, during those Friday evening classes on counseling and about how your body develops, I never got much information about sex from my parents. And as a young adult, I had to navigate my way and find who I am sexually by myself. So I find that, to me, talking about sex in a safe way and including a doctor in most of our talks where they can clarify some 1-2 things is very important, because it brings out it saves the society basically. Right now, as I'm doing this series, it's in Feb, and Kenya is facing a pandemic of a kind about supergonorrhea. And I'm thinking, like, if we were able to navigate various sexual issues, like first accepting that sex is natural, it's a primal desire. Sex comes after breathing, eating. It's part of life, and we cannot quite evade it. And then talking about taboo, acknowledging that in most African homes, sex has been a taboo, and then acknowledging that sex is important because at the end of the day, we were created to procreate. I feel that most of the bad sexual decisions that we have made in our lives have not been intentional. Teenage pregnancies, rape, abuse, bad sexual habits, sexual addictions, lust, and all these taboo and things that are abominations even to God that we do and are sexually related, like sex brings about spiritual impurity and all that. But I feel that if we could have a safe space to talk about these things and discuss and talk about everything, it could actually be a better and safer society. So that's the reason behind this. In episode 1, I don't think today is episode 1. I think today is just basically the introduction. We'll be talking about healthy sexual behaviors. Episode 2, we'll talk about unhealthy sexual behaviors. Episode 3, we'll talk about women and their perceptions of sex. In episode 4, we'll talk about what is actually happening and might be to many people taboo, but it is happening, so we must acknowledge it. About toys, we'll talk about sex toys, what they are, and why people choose to indulge in them. In episode 5, we'll talk about men and sex. We'll talk about the perception of men and what they think about sex and all that. And in all these episodes where there are questions, I will really acknowledge and I'll want to talk about them with you. And I have a friend of mine who's a doctor, and I'll be including him in these talks so that we can clarify these things. We'll talk about places that people consider good for sex. We'll talk about desire. We'll talk about intimacy. We'll talk about lust. We'll talk about sex and marriage. We'll talk about sexual health, like when to see a doctor, when to not see a doctor, about UTIs, about infections. We'll talk about celibacy. We'll talk about pornography. We'll talk about races and sex. We'll talk about drugs and sex. We'll talk about miscarriages and abortions. We'll talk about kinks and freaks. And at the end of the series, which is episode 21 and 22, it's that long, we'll have a group affair. Everyone is welcome, and we'll talk about embarrassing sexual moments and lessons that we've learned about sex along the way. And episode 22 will be a Q&A about the series Sex Talks with Elysian, about the whole series, the questions you might have along the way. So I'm freaking out. I had to do this. Till next time, this is Elisa the Great. Adios, amigo. Bye-bye.